Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ibrahim. Uh, and in this video, I'm going to going through the first project in 30-day data analytics challenge. I started this challenge for beginners looking to challenge themselves, looking to practice hands-on, beginners tired of just continuously learning, because I believe actually practicing what you've learned and building stuff is the best way to learn. So that's exactly why I started this challenge. In the early phases when I was just starting out, I fell into the trap of, just constantly learning new stuff, even stuff that are not really relevant. I believe as a data analyst, you don't really need to know all this stuff because it's impossible. There are just some basic and important things you need to know and important tools to focus on. For this challenge, we're going to be focusing on SQL and Power BI. I believe these are the most important tools today. You need a tool for querying and data cleaning, and you need another tool for data visualization. So there are a variety of data visualization tools. We have Tableau, we have Looker, but I still believe Power BI is my favorite because it's simple to use. And yeah, for the first project, actually, we're going to be focusing on SQL. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be focusing on the healthcare industry, and the data set we'll be using is based on the OWID. If you search for our world in data COVID-19 data set, before I started this challenge, I had to do some research on the top data analytics industries to work in. And when you search for this, I believe if you're just starting out, you should try to get an understanding of what's going on, the industries that hire data analysts the most. So for this challenge, we're going to be focusing on any of these industries. Um, for the first cohort, we're going to be creating a total of 4 projects. So here's the first one we're going through right now, the healthcare. And the next one, I'm probably going to go through the finance. This is the most popular, I think, is the one that's showing up first. The finance industry is booming right now for some reason for data analysts. So if you're looking to get into data analytics, I highly recommend just niching or focusing on finance, but it really depends on the industry you're passionate about. So we're going to be creating projects around any of these industries. And for the healthcare, like I said, we're going to be using the OWID COVID-19 pandemic data set. So our aim is to import this data set and try to answer some business questions. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. So before we get started, so the first thing we want to do, I'd like you to check out our resource folder. I have a lot of files stored there for this project. So in here you can find the CSV file already downloaded, and you can also find the data dictionary. So if I open it, it just contains the description of the columns in the data set. It doesn't include all the columns, but I just focus on the most important columns that you might need for your analysis. So we have columns on location, we have continent, report date, population, total cases, which is the total number of confirmed COVID-19 cases, and new cases. We also have total deaths. So I highly recommend you to go through this data dictionary just to get an understanding of the data set. It really helps, because it helps you determine some great business questions to answer. As a data analyst, what I want you to focus on the most is insights, the insights you're able to generate, because that is what business and stakeholders care about. You're helping them make decisions, you're sharing with them insights that might be valuable to their business. So once you've gone through this, another thing I want you to go through in the resource folder. Here's the brief. This is the most important one. This just basically shares everything you're going to be working on. So here's the brief. In this project, you take on the role of a data analyst. We're going to make things much more engaging and fun. We're going to be using a fictional company called Health Track AI. So your job is to analyze the OWID COVID-19 healthcare dataset using SQL. Okay, so the tool we'll be using for this project is going to be SQL. So there are various SQL tools you can use. For this particular challenge, I'm going to be using SQL Server, but there are various SQL tools you can use. You can use MySQL, you can use SQLite, etc. But I highly recommend you use SQL Server, because it's going to be easy to follow along with me. Because depending on the SQL tool you use, your queries might differ. But so if you don't currently have SSMS installed, it's not that hard. You can just input it into Google. Let me just search for SSMS. Let me just try this if it will work. Okay, so I think here's the link, and there are various videos that can guide you through how you can install SSMS. So once you've installed SQL Server Management Studio, so that's what it means. So once you've installed it, the next thing, let me just keep scrolling through the brief. So here's the data set. So there are a total of 36 columns in the table. Here are some examples of the columns you might find. And like I said, you should go through the data dictionary to get an understanding of what the columns are all about. So here are some data cleaning tasks you can do. But to streamline things a little bit, in the project resources folder, you'll find something called this OWID COVID dataset view. And what a view is like a virtual table you can reference instead of your original table. The thing with a view is you can make certain changes to your table that doesn't really stay permanent. So instead of accessing your original table, you can just access your view instead. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this code. After we've imported our data set, we're going to copy this code, we're going to run it, then we're going to select from this view instead of selecting from our original table. So that way we can make any changes we want, and those changes would not stay permanent. So let's just get started. So the first thing we have to do is we have to create a database. So to do that, it's not that hard. Just right click on database and select new database. So you can name your database whatever you want, but for this purpose, let me just name it OWID COVID. So let me just click on OK. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to try to import the CSV file into the database. So to do that, I'm just going to right click on our database, then I'm going to go to task and import data. So let me click on next. So here we're going to select our data source. That's where our data is coming from. And for this purpose, our data is coming through a flat file source. The flat files are like CSVs, Excel files, etc. So here we're going to select our file here. And since it's CSV, I'm going to change this from text to CSV. So here's our file over here. You can go ahead and download it. I've already downloaded it. Okay, so once we've selected our file, let me click on next. So here's a preview of how our data looks like. We have ISO code, continent, location. We have a lot of columns in here. As you can see, we have a lot of blank spaces here. So that's why data cleaning is important, right? Just to get rid of all these data inconsistencies. So let me just click on next. And here is asking us for our destination. Uh, and in this case, our destination is SQL Server. So what we're going to select is Microsoft OLE DB provider for SQL Server. So here's like the server name. I actually haven't shared. Whenever you open SQL Server, it's going to have like a prompt box that you can find your server name. You can also find it here. So you can see it's the same thing. So your server name might vary, depending. So let me just click on next. Click on next. Okay, before I finish this, I want to show you something. Once you click on edit mappings, this is just basically if you're trying to like change like the data type of certain columns or the size or whether you want it to accept null values or not. And in this case, SQL Server seems to like be giving it a data type of varchar for every single one of our columns, which shouldn't be so. There are some cases, some columns like date. Obviously, date should not be varchar, so you can always change it here from varchar to date. And the rest, some other columns like total debts, normally is in figures. So normally we might have to keep it to like float or integer, but usually I like to keep it in float. But to save time, I'm just going to import it as is because there's not much time to be changing the data type for every single one of them. So let me just click on OK, and I'm going to show you how to get around this later on. So let me click on finish. I think that's pretty much it. Okay, so we have our rows imported. So we have over 429,000 rows. It's quite a lot. So let me just click on close. Okay, so let me just refresh our database to see if our table is going to show up. So you can find the list of your tables over here. So yeah, as you can see, table has been imported successfully. So now that we have our table imported, what we want to do next is I want to import this view code, like I said, so that way all our data cleaning is going to be done, and we can just include the columns we need for this analysis. But before I keep going, I want to just keep scrolling through the brief just to show you. So as you can see, our analysis goals. So here are some analysis we want to perform. Here are some I managed to come up with. You can feel free to add more depending on the columns. There are so many insights you can get um, based on the columns that are in the data set. So that's pretty much it. So first of all, I have to import the views to perform all these data cleaning tasks. So to do that, I'm just going to open this. So let me just copy all of this code. Okay, so I'm just going to click on new query. But first, I have to specify which database I want it to reference, because I already have some database created here. So it's always best practice to determine to specify what database you want SQL to reference. So using the use keyword, we're just basically telling SQL Server to use this database. So now that we got that sorted out, I'm just going to paste the code for the view. And this, just to explain this briefly, what we're doing here is so we're asking SQL to create or alter view. SQL is first going to analyze our database to see if the view has been already created. So if the view has been already created, it's going to alter the view instead. So that's just basically what this means. And all these queries is just basically, changing the data type of certain columns to the right data type. So for new cases, we're changing it to float. For all these columns also, we're changing them to float data type. So, and here also, all we're doing here is we're just removing negative values, because having negative values doesn't really do much for analysis. It's useless for our analysis. So here we're just saying this is like an if statement. It's just checking when this column is less than 0, which is negative, then we're replacing that with null. So it's just going to search through negative values and it's going to replace it with null. So let me just try to run this. Let me create the view. So let me just highlight all of this all the way to here. So let me just click on execute. And if you want to see where your views are stored, over here, once you open this folder, you can see that our view has been created over here. So now, instead of accessing our original table, which is called this, we're going to be referencing this one instead. So let me just try to run this to see what's in there. Okay, so yeah, we have a view created successfully. So you can always feel free to adjust this view. In this case, I want to add a new column called continent, because it's going to be useful for our analysis later. So I'm just going to copy any of this, maybe location, and let me just paste it down here. Then I'm just going to replace it with continent. Yeah, we have it over here. I'm just going to name this also continent. Okay, so now so here we have a CTE over here, which is just like a temporary table we can access. So here we're going to be selecting, we want to include a continent also. I can just include it here. And normally I think it's best practice for it to come first, before our location, if you know what I mean. So let me just try to um alter this view. Okay, so let me try to run this one more time to see if our continent has been created. So let me just execute this. Okay, so we have a continent created. So I believe this is probably all we're going to need. We can always adjust it later. So without further ado, let's just start answering the business questions. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on new query. Okay, so now that we've got our new query created, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to copy and paste all of our business questions, and we're going to try to answer it one by one. So let me just copy all of this. Okay, so let me just copy it and paste it into SQL Server. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to comment them out. Okay, so now that I've commented them out, first things first, I need to actually know all the what's inside the table, and it's just going to make things easier. So I want to select all from this. I think it's called Clean COVID Insight. Okay, so let me try to run this, if it will actually run. Okay, so here we can see we have all our columns in here. So for this analysis, we want to know the worst day where we had the highest new cases. We want to find the day we had the highest new cases. So we're going to need, of course, we're going to need the report dates. We're also going to need the new cases column. We might also need the location to know where each cases occurred. So these are the three columns we need. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select, I need to select the report date. I also need to select the new cases. And lastly, I need the location. So we're selecting this from plain COVID insights. So let me just run this first to see what's going to bring up. Okay, so we have all of this. We have the report date, we have the new cases and location. Okay, so next, so to determine the day we had the highest infections, we might need to use the order by. I want to order by in descending order. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to order by new cases, and that will be in descending order. So it's going to start from the highest cases first, all the way to the lowest. And as we can see here, to make this easier, I think I want the location to come second and the new cases to be here. So I'm just going to sort out everything. Let me just reorder them. Okay, so just going to make things much more easier. Okay, it's much better here. So here, as we can see, location world has the highest new cases, but this doesn't really show me much actually, because location world does not exist. All some locations here also don't exist, like upper middle income countries. These locations don't exist. So to battle this, to get rid of all these, irrelevant locations, to do this, I might need to involve the continent column. So the reason I'm doing this is that obviously all these locations that don't exist, they are not going to have a continent. Only real locations would have a continent. So I'm going to show you what I mean in a second. So let me just run this first. So as you can see, as I guessed, we can't really see a continent for some of these locations. But for China, of course, the continent exists. So what we want to do is we want to get rid of all these blank values of all the locations where the continent does not exist. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to use the where clause. That will be where continent is not equal to blank. Okay, so these are blank values, so this is just determining blank. So let me just try to run this. Okay, so it seems we got our issue fixed. So as you can see, we don't have any more blank values, and all the locations we were trying to get rid of are all gone. So now I think we've managed to answer this question. As you can see here, China had the highest new cases, and the day the highest new infections broke out was this date, 2022 December 25. So we've managed to answer this question. So let's move on to the next one. So the next question we want to answer is we want to determine the countries with the highest deaths. So which countries had the highest total COVID-19 deaths? So to do this, first of all, the columns I'm going to need, we're going to need the countries, of course. So that will be location. We might also need, first, let me just try to see what's inside this this view. So I want to know what the column is named before accessing it. So let me just select all from. Okay, so let me just run this first. So it always helps to just get an overview of everything that's in the table or view. So what we're going to need here is we're going to need the location. We're also going to need the total deaths, I think. So um, let me just select the location here, and also we're also going to need our total debt. So let me just select total debts just to okay. So let me just run this first to see what is going to bring. Okay, so we have our location and total debt. So we want to get to know countries with the highest debt. So what we can do as we did here. We can order by the total debt in descending order. And of course, we need to get rid of the locations we don't need. So I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to paste it down here. So let me try to run this to see if it's going to give us what we want. Okay, here we can see that the United States had the highest total debt. But to make things much more cleaner and to just get rid of these repeating values, what we can do is to introduce an aggregate function. So what I want to do now is I want to know the recent highest total. So what we're going to invite in is the max function, just to show the recent highest total. So that is what we need. So since we're inviting the max here, we might have to group by. So let me just group by. We're going to group by the location. Okay, so let me just try to, let's give this a name just to make this easier to read. I'm just going to name this latest debt. So now what we're going to do now we're going to be ordering by latest debt instead of total debt. Okay, so let me just run this now to see what it's going to bring. Okay, as you can see, it's much more cleaner now. So as you can see, the United States had the highest total debt. To make things much even more cleaner, we can just filter it down to the top 10. So to do that, we're just going to invite the top 10 function. Is that easy? So we're just going to write top 10. So it's just going to show us the top 10 countries with the highest debt. So here we can see the United States is actually leading. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Now what we want to do here, we want to check the global new cases over time. So what this means is just how cases have been trending over time from the beginning of when it started to the end, to like the most recent. So we're just trying to see what's going on, an overview. So to do that, of course, as always, let me just select all. Okay, so what we want to do now is we want to see global new cases over time. So the columns we might need is we're probably going to need the location. We're also going to need the summary, just to get the summary of new cases. So I'm just going to name this as new cases summary, just to make things much more easier to read. Okay, so what else do we need? I think that's pretty much it, honestly. So I'm going to be selecting this from, okay, I already did that. Okay, so now what we have to do, oh, of course, we're going to need the dates. So that way we can order by the date from the beginning of time to the end of time. Okay, so we have a date. So what we have to do now, we have to group by report date and location. And of course, we also have to order by the report date. So just to show from the beginning of time to the most recent. So let's see if this will actually work. Okay. So we have okay, I made a mistake over here. I didn't include the comma. Let me run this one more time. Okay, so it's starting from the beginning of time all the way to the recent. So as we can see, things are steady. Things keep things are still steady. So I want to see when we got our first case reported. So as I keep scrolling, I can see here that Germany reported its first case in January 5th, which is quite fascinating because usually COVID didn't start booming until around, I think that was March. And it's fascinating to see that, we've been getting some cases even before that. So here we can see Germany reported its first case. And as you keep scrolling, we can see how we started growing. So it's still steady. Oh, let's filter out all these columns. Let me just filter it. Let me filter it out real quick. Let me just copy this. And I'm just going to paste it down here. Okay, let me run this one more time. Okay, since we filter out some things, you can see that things changed, So here, instead of Mexico being the first, Argentina is showing up first. Let me just keep scrolling. Okay, and now we can see that China reported its first case. So I want to see where things started booming. Okay, I saw something just now. Okay, Finland. I guess around April 19, Finland reported a total of 699 cases. So you get the point. You can keep scrolling through this just to see the trend and now the cases have been rising and falling. If you get my point. So this insight is really useful, for healthcare officials just to know what's going on, how bad things are. So we are going to move on to the next question. And for the next question or insight, what we want to get is the 7-day average new cases. So in other words, we want to know the average of new cases that are happening in the last 7 days. So we want to know how did new cases trend over time using a rolling 7-day average. And the only way we can do this is through a window function. But first, let me select the, I think we're going to need the dates just to determine. After the date, we're also going to need probably the location. And now what we want to do now, so what a window function is it's similar to a group by, but it performs row by row calculations. So it scans all the rows in a particular columns, then it performs calculations for those rows one by one. So what we want to do now is we want to determine the average of new cases. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use the over function. And what this does is that it performs calculations for all the rows. So all we're saying is we want to perform the average of new cases over all the rows. So let's select this from a column. Okay, there we go. So in this case, let's just try to run this first. And the cool thing about a window function is whenever you use an aggregate function, you don't have to include a group by. So let's just run this first to see what it's going to bring. Okay, so as you can see, it's performing the calculations for every single one of the rows, regardless of the duplicates. So as you can see, that is what we get. And this is not what we want. So it has performed the calculations for all of the rows. So here's the result we got. So what we want to do here is we want to segment it by location. So we want to perform calculation for a particular location, then it's going to move on to the next location. So to do this, all we have to do is we just have to say we want it to partition by. We want it to partition by location. Okay, so next, another function that might be valuable is the order by. So basically, I just want it to start the calculation from the beginning of time to the recent total. So what we're going to do is we're going to order by report date. Okay, and the most important part, what we want to do, we want to perform the average of new cases in the last 7 days. And to do this, all we want to do is we're going to use the rows between. So we're basically, the window function is basically going to, analyze the rows. Then it's going to count certain rows to perform the calculation. So you can determine 7 days to starting from this to this. So it's going to perform the calculation from this row to this row. So that's why we're using the rows between. So next, all we have to do is we're going to write 6 preceding. This is basically just telling it to perform calculation for 6 days, and we're going to include the current row. So altogether, we have calculation for 7 days. So let's give this a name to just make it much more easier to read. So I'm just going to name this average cases 7 days. Okay, so let's try to run this to see if it's going to work. Okay, so as you can see, the calculation, let's keep scrolling. It starts from this date. So currently things are steady. We don't really see any new cases. So, but as we keep scrolling down, we're going to be seeing much more results. Okay, so I can start to see some results over here. So here we can see in Australia, here's the average of new cases that have happened. I think starting from 1. Okay, I think it starts here. It's been steady so far. So it's just dropping and rising, I think. So to show you what it means by 7 days, you can count here. So from this date to this date, we can see that nothing has happened yet. So let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's the cool thing about a window function. You can split your calculations to different things. So you can split it to for like a week calculation, and you can also determine how you want the calculation to be performed, in what order you want the calculation to be performed. So to make this much more interactive, I just want to filter it out by a particular location. I also think it would be best practice to just copy this to get rid of, the locations we don't need. So let me just copy this. And I'm just going to paste it down here. Okay, this I'm just going to, you can just say, and I want to filter it out by a particular location. And location is equal to Let's just do Nigeria. Okay, I think let's see if it will run. You don't always have to like highlight as I'm highlighting, but there are cases where SQL Server tries to perform all the queries. I try to run all the queries we've run previously, so that's why I always try to highlight. So, okay, so in Nigeria, starting from January 5 to January 11, we can see that cases have been steady so far. Starting from January 12 to uh, probably January 18, it's also been steady. So you get the point. So as you keep scrolling, obviously, you're going to be seeing a trend to see if it's rising and falling. So as you can see, we started getting like our first new cases starting from March 1st. So here's the average of the new cases that have happened in that 7 days. And let's move on to the next one. So in this case, all we want to do is we want to determine the month where we had like the highest new case. So it shouldn't be that hard. All we have to do is select. I think we're just going to select the month. So what we want to do now is we want to extract the month from the date. So that's why I'm using the month function. So that'll be month report dates. So now that we've extracted the month, let's give this a name. Okay, so now we need, I think, a summary of new cases. So let's see. So we might also need, I think let's just run with this first to just see what it's going to bring. So we want to select this from this table. And of course, we have to go by the month report date. I'm not sure if this is actually going to work, but let's just see. Okay, so let me try to run this first just to see what it's going to bring. Okay, it works. So the next thing we want to do is I just want to like order by I want to order by this. So let me give this a name. So that will be new cases summary. Let's just name this. So that will be new cases. We want to order by new cases sum. And that will be in descending order. Okay. So let's run this. Okay. So in this case, we can see that January, the month January, we kind of like had the highest new cases. But in this case, we are summing, so I'm not sure if I'm using the right function. So we might try something else. Instead of summing, we can just order by the new cases. Okay, so we don't need a group by for this. I'm just going to get rid of this. So we are going to order by new cases in descending order, just to see the difference in results. Okay, in this case, we can see that December, that's when we're having like the highest new cases. So the reason why a summary is useful is that it's going to sum up all of this. So we're not going to be getting repeating values like this. So I guess we managed to answer this question. And if you want to, you can always extract the year instead of the month. So let me just show you what I mean. So that's the one of the cool things about SQL. You can extract dates. Okay, so here, as you can see, 2022 had the highest new cases. So I guess we managed to answer this question. Now let's move on to the next question. And in this case, what we want to do, we want to know how many deaths were recorded compared to the population size. So we want to know which country had the highest deaths based on their population. So for example, if a country has a population of 1 million and they had like a death of over 900,000, obviously we know they had the highest death uh, compared to their population size. So to do this, we're probably going to just divide the total death by the population. So let me just select, I'm going to select, first I want to select the recent total of the total death. So just to avoid repeating values. So also I want to get to know the recent population, because there are cases when population are increasing and there are cases where they are decreasing. So I just want to know the recent one. So, and next, what we want to do is we will have to divide this by this. Okay, so, and to format it into like a percentage, it just makes things easier. So I want it in a way that 0% would be like the lowest percentage and 1% would be the highest. So to format things into the percentage, I'm just going to times it by 100. I might try to include this calculation in the brief just to make things easier. So let me just select this from that will be, wait a minute. So let's try to run this to see if it will actually work. Okay. Oh, I forgot. I think we should include the location just to split things up a little. Okay, so now we have to group by the location. There we go. So, and of course, let's give this a name just to make things easier to read. So I'm just going to name this latest death. And this, I'm going to name this, okay. So let me just run this one more time. Okay, so I guess we got what we need. So, but this is not very helpful. What I want to do, I want to order by this, just to know the country that had the highest death versus population. So I'm just going to order by deaths. Yeah, there we go. So let's try to run this. In descending order. So that's what we want. Okay. Okay, let's run this. Okay, so as we can see here, Peru had the highest deaths based on their population size. And if you want to like test to see if the calculation is correct, so it seems it's pretty much correct. Peru had like a total population of 340 million, I think, and they had a total death of 220,000. So as we keep scrolling, we can see the death with the lowest. So as you can see, Pitcairn had like a population of 47 and they had like 0 deaths. So you can see that the calculation is pretty much correct. So 0% is the lowest and 1% is the highest. So currently now 0.64% is the current highest. To make this much more readable, we can use the round function to round it into like a certain decimal place. So what you're going to do in front of this max, I'm just going to write round, open the bracket, then I'm going to tell it like how many decimal places do I want it to round it to. So in this case, I want it to be 2 decimal places. So let's run this. Okay, so you see we got exactly what we want. So we've managed to answer this question. So let's move on to the last and final question. So to move on to the final question, so what we want to determine here is the case fatality ratio. So we want to know the percentage of confirmed cases that resulted in death. So it's going to be similar to what we did here. We're just going to be dividing the total deaths by the total cases. So I'm just going to copy this above and I'm going to paste it down here. Okay, so all we have to do now, I'm just going to change this to total cases. Okay, let me just run this. All right, so let me try. Let's give this a different name, of course. Call the case fatality ratio. Okay, so we're going to be ordering by case fatality ratio. All right, so let's try to run this to see if it will work. Okay, since we have an error, it's saying divide by 0 encountered. This is totally normal in SQL Server. Normally when it encounters a 0, it normally gives us an error. So to combat this, we're just going to be using the null if function. So we're just basically saying whenever it encounters a 0, we want SQL to change it to a null. So what we're going to do here is I'm just going to put 0 here. Let me close the bracket. Okay, so let's run this. It should work now. Okay, as you can see, it works. So wait a minute, I don't need population. What I need is the total cases. So I want the max of, I think all I need is in, let's try this to see. All I need is the max of total cases. Okay, so let's just run this one more time. Okay, so let's give this a different name. That will be latest cases. All right, I think we managed to answer this question. As you can see, Yemen had the highest case fatality ratio. Here's their list of cases, and here's the deaths that they got from it. And as we keep scrolling down, just to know if the calculation is correct, you can see it's changing whenever it encounters a 0, it's changing it to null, just as we specified here. So let's see. Here we can see here's the list of cases they got, and they had 0 deaths. So that's why we're getting a 0 case fatality ratio here. So you can see our calculation is correct. We got exactly what we needed, and we managed to answer this question also. So we know that Yemen had the highest case to fatality ratio, followed by Sudan. So before I wrap this up, we can just make things a little bit more cleaner, just to know the top 10 countries that had the highest case fatality ratio. And I think it's also best practice to copy and paste where continent is not equal to blank, just to get rid of the locations we don't need, if you know what I mean. So let's just do this. So I'm just going to paste it over here. So let's run this now. Okay, so here's the top 10 countries with the highest case to fatality ratio. So this insight is amazing, really perfect, just to know how bad things are currently. And I guess that's pretty much it. I hope you guys learned something new from this video, and I really challenge you to try this out yourself. Try to answer all these questions, and of course, if you have any more questions to add or insights to add, please feel free. It's really nice. It's really great. It's a really great learning opportunity. We have so many columns in this table. You can always adjust your view and include those columns and run it. You can get various insights from it. So yeah, I hope this was helpful, guys. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the comment section. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. I hope this was helpful, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.